I don't know.
and building changes. And Robin is here with me at Building Changes. She's going to be helping collect your questions and make sure that we ask them of our panelists at the end of the presentations. Feel free to send us in writing through your chat function your questions during the webinar. I don't want to take everybody off mute since there's so many folks in attendance. There's around 90 folks from around the state attending the webinar today. And as I mentioned, we've got about an hour for the presentations, and then the last 30 minutes of the webinar will be for your questions and answers and discussion. And after the webinar, you will all get an electronic survey via email through your registration. Please take a few minutes to answer those 7 questions so that we can improve webinars like this in the future. So our panelists today are Jean Blackburn, McKinney-Vento Liaison from the Highline School District. Christy Johnson is the Director of Housing Initiatives at King County Housing Authority. Roxana Parise from the Bellingham School District. She's also a homeless liaison there. Jennifer Martin, the Homeless Service Coordinator for SNAP in Spokane. And Leslie Camden Gould. She is a McKinney-Vento liaison at the Central Valley School District. Jean, can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon.
Thanks for being here, Jean.
No problem. So we ready?
We are.
Okay. So as Cary said, I'm Jean Blackburn, and I'm the McKinney-Vento liaison in the Highline Public Schools. And on your slide, you'll also see Antonio Lewis, who is the McKinney-Vento family support worker with the district. And he and I run the McKinney-Vento program to make sure that we're meeting federal law and qualifying kids and then providing them with services. So in our district, we have 19,000 students in 37 schools, 18 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 12 high schools, and some of those are considered small schools. We have a skills center, and as you can see, a homeschool center, early education center, and other programs. A challenge for us in the Highline Public Schools is that our schools are located in 4 cities, Des Moines, SeaTac, Burien, Normandy Park, as well as the unincorporated areas of King County, including White Center and Boulevard Park. Of our 19,000 students, 70% are enrolled in free and reduced lunch programs, although we do have several elementary schools that are 90 to 97% free or reduced lunch. We attribute to the growth in our program every year. I believe families are moving from Seattle into South King County, where housing is more affordable. The Brookings Institute did a study and wrote a book about suburban poverty, and it grew from 80% in from 2000 to 2011, with much of the growth in the cities served by the Highline Public Schools. But even though our housing might be more affordable than in Seattle or other areas, our families are still not able to pay their rent. They become evicted, they become homeless, and call the district for assistance. As you can see on the slide, we had 939 homeless students during the 2013-14 school year. Right now, today, we're at 934, so we will see that we will exceed that. To put all this in perspective, there are 30,609 homeless students in Washington in 2013. And the number of homeless students across Washington has increased by 82% in the last 6 years. And Highline's no exception. Homelessness amongst our student population has increased nearly 13% per year. We have increased from 517 homeless children in 2008 to 939 in 2014. And as I mentioned before, we will exceed that number by June of this year. Because of our numbers in homeless students, we apply for the competitive grant through OSPI, and we have been awarded that since starting our program back in 2006 and 2007. And that money comes in, and we choose to pay Antonio Lewis's salary out of that, the family support worker. I am hired 2 days a week to be the liaison, and he works 25 hours a week. And so both of us run the program, but I would say that Antonio does a lot of the transportation needs and troubleshooting when I'm not available. Homelessness is expensive for families and school districts. One of our families reported that it cost her family more to be homeless than it did to be housed, and some of you probably really understand that. Some of our homeless families seek shelter at substandard, rundown, inadequate, and sometimes unsafe motels along Pac Highway, Pacific Highway, or we have a nearby KOA campground. Monthly stays at these places are costing families roughly $1,400 to $1,700 per month, and this is more than the average of a 2-bedroom apartment in Des Moines, which that might be approximately $1,060. So families that are living in our motels are really paying with funds that they don't have necessarily. Homeless families who don't have cooking facilities find themselves spending more money on food by eating at fast food restaurants or at various delis and grocery stores or convenience stores. And of course, then they're eating foods that are not necessarily high in nutrition. Our transportation costs are substantial, as you can imagine, reaching $846,000 during the 2013-14 school year. We arrange transportation, and our expenses include rides via school bus, taxi cabs, and we provide ORCA cards for older homeless students. And sometimes with elementary students, if we cannot run a bus or the cab seems to be difficult, we will give a parent an ORCA card to ride with their student. So our transportation costs are substantial, even though we do share costs with other districts. I'll talk about partnerships, but I want to explain a little bit about how we run our program. So in our district, we have what we call McKinney-Vento designees at each school. So those people are usually the counselors in elementary schools and could also be registrars or office managers in secondary schools. Our students enroll at the school, which may be different than other districts. So our designees, when a family comes in and identifies themselves as homeless, they qualify the students. They fill out the paperwork. They decide if transportation is needed, and then send the forms to the district office where Antonio and I sign off, and then get the transportation going by coordinating with our transportation department. And then we are also the ones that notify our nutrition services so that a child can receive the same day nutrition without the parent having to fill out additional forms. And we also have a residency section on our enrollment forms so that families who come and enroll can self-identify. So we have districts set aside Title I funds, and out of those funds we pay for school-related expenditures such as school uniforms, school supplies, field trips, summer school tuition, birth certificates, for example, cap and gowns, school-related expenses so that students can receive comparable services to their housed peers. But with an emphasis on supporting school stability and academic growth for our students, we do partner with a variety of local community-based organizations, as you can see on this slide, to help bring resources to our students. And we are a district of great need, but we have found that the cities and community has rallied behind us to help with our homeless population. Just highlight one partnership that we have is the city of SeaTac is going to be hosting its 9th annual Back to School Resource Fair in August, and Des Moines will host its 2nd annual Back to School Fair, organized all by community agencies, community groups, churches, Alaska Airlines, for example, some of our big businesses that are around this area. And children get a free backpack as well as the school supplies, but parents also have a chance to find out about community resources. And our event has gotten so big in SeaTac, we've given away 2,100 backpacks each year for the last 3 years. We do have a lot of community resources, so families can meet with providers and try to get their needs met. The district also comes to this event and helps families get enrolled in school, which has been very helpful, or update the emergency contact. So we feel by doing this, by those cities of SeaTac and City of Des Moines, it really saves a family about $50 a child that they could put towards either their own housing or their utilities, and it's very appreciative. In addition to the district serving the 4 cities and the unincorporated areas, we do have an airport right in the middle of our district called SeaTac Airport. And it does divide the district in terms of transportation and resources. And as the airport has grown in the past few years, or the past 20 years, more families have been displaced. Some find housing, some don't. And there is a disparity between the 4 cities in terms of how they fund their own human services department, how they interact with the school district. One thing I do want to highlight is we have a Highline Schools Foundation that's a nonprofit that started up to help the whole district, help students in the whole district. They give Excel grants to teachers. They give scholarships. They buy musical instruments when the district needs more funds. But they've also taken an interest in the McKinney-Vento program and have provided us every year with quite a few food cards for families that run out at the end of the month, as well as Old Navy gift cards so that students can buy clothing. We don't have a district-wide clothing bank in our district. So that resource has been very, very good for us. They will also just help us with hygiene needs for families by giving us petty cash so that we can help families meet those needs. And also due to the need, the district has several MOU, memorandums of understandings, with agencies such as NAVOS. We have at most of our schools, NAVOS is there, a mental health agency to provide site-based counseling. As well, on 2 campuses, we have Health Point that has a school-based health clinic, which has been very helpful. But with all these services, with all these partnerships, we still felt and we still feel that there's a significant gap in meeting our families' most basic needs, which is housing. Over the years, I've been a social worker for 22 years in the district. Prior to the program that Christy will talk about, all of us would be receiving 5 to 6 phone calls a day from families seeking shelter or looking for housing resources. Families would even call the schools asking for funds for housing because they were going to be evicted. They needed $500 by the end of the month. And I'm sure this is consistent with what other districts experience when trying to support their students and families. Our district does not have a shelter for homeless families, and so a lot of our families were required to seek shelter outside of Highline. But as we all know, families are staying in shelters longer, so that resource is not as readily available as in past years. And now we go through the 211 system where families call and are on a waiting list and wait their turn to get an interview. So with all the calls that we were getting, especially on Friday afternoons when families were just in crisis, our counselors and social workers felt helpless, not knowing what to do. So in 2012, Highline Public Schools partnered with the Roadmap Consortium to apply for the Race to the Top grant. And one of these initiatives proposed as part of this application was to pilot a program between Highline Public Schools and King County Housing Authority to implement a rapid rehousing program that would help rehouse homeless families within the Highline community. And we were so excited by this, and it was finally our way to interact with the housing community and the housing providers. This was just a great opportunity, and has been a great opportunity for us. At the time, we didn't fully understand what rapid rehousing services were, but we knew that developing this connection with the housing folks would be very beneficial. The pilot would help us connect our families with basic resources and would further our efforts to keep children at their school of origin, support school stability and consistency in education, which is, we're all striving to do that. As part of the housing program that Christy will talk about, we had lots of planning meetings and discussions between Highline Public Schools and King County Housing. Leaders at all levels within King County Housing as well as the district were committed to the program and helped design and implement what's now known as the Student and Family Stability Initiative. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy Johnson with the King County Housing Authority, and she will tell you more about this initiative.
Thanks, Jean.
Hey, Christy.
Yeah.
Christy, before you get started, we got a question already about the different definitions for homelessness. If you could work that into your presentation, that would be great. Since
Yeah,
you're kind
sure.
of influence of that. The other thing that I'd ask is that if folks have questions that they want to send us on the fly, we're keeping track of that, and we'll gather them for the end and for the discussion period at the end of the webinar. So send those along now if you've got them through either the question function or the chat function. You can direct things straight to us as staff if you don't want everybody to see your question.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cary, and thanks, Jean.
You're welcome.
My name is Christy. As Jean said, Christy Johnson. I'm with King County Housing Authority. I'm the Director of Homeless Initiatives here at KCHA. And I'd like to just give you a little bit of background before I dive into the Student and Family Stability Initiative on KCHA. Fundamental to our mission here at KCHA is our work to reduce and end homelessness in our community. Through our public housing and Section 8 programs, which is the more traditional subsidized housing programs, we house over 20,000 students that span across 17 different school districts in King County. We recognize that stable housing is necessary, but alone is not enough and not sufficient in effecting meaningful change for the thousands of children that sleep under our roofs every night. With that said, we really strive to build cross-sector collaborations across different systems, school districts being one of them, that actually launch families into success for today and for future generations of the children who we're serving. So that's a little background. We have several different initiatives here at KCHA with probably 5 different school districts right now. Most of those are place-based initiatives, but what I'm going to talk to you about today is our Student and Family Stability Initiative with the Highline School District. So on the next slide, you will see a little bit of background about the SFSI Pilot. I'll refer to it as SFSI, so it's not so much of a mouthful. But basically, our designation here at KCHA as a designation through HUD as a moving to work agency has enabled us to design and implement unique rent subsidy programs that meet the needs of people in our community. And we've been hearing a lot about rapid rehousing in the housing world lately as being an emerging best practice approach to reducing homelessness. So we decided to test it and give it a try and start out with Highline. Our SFSI initiative launched back in October of 2013, and what I will say, we went back and forth a little bit about which definition to use because, as most of you may be aware, HUD programs usually use the HUD definition, where the school district programs are using the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. So here in our traditional housing programs, we're using the HUD definition, but we recognize that if we were going to be partnering with a school district, it would be important that we were aligned on who it was we were trying to serve and using the same definition. Furthermore, we also recognize that children who are living in very doubled up and overcrowded situations, or children that are living in motels or that their families are paying for, may not be living in necessarily the best situations that foster academic growth for the children. And we have seen a lot of very, very overcrowded families that are doubled up that have been coming through this pilot. One that sticks at the front of my mind, I think, was a family of 12 that was living in a 2-bedroom. with another family. So in total, there was 12 people living in a 2-bedroom unit. So we have adopted the McKinney-Vento definition, which we were allowed to do per our NTW agreement for this pilot. So basically, the SFSI program, we have Highline Public School staff located in 18 different elementary schools that basically identify eligible families through the use of a common screening tool that we developed. They then make referrals to Neighborhood House, who is KCHA's contracted service provider. Neighborhood House then conducts eligibility screening of the families referred, and they're primarily looking to ensure that at least one parent has the ability to work and earn some sort of an income that would be able to take over the rent payments once the SFSI rent assistance has ended, which is generally 3 to 6 months or 3 to 4 months on average. Once families are screened in by Neighborhood House, they begin their housing search within the private rental market in the Highline community. They have a housing case manager that works with them really closely, and they work on identification of housing barriers. So if there's things that are getting in the way of people being able to actually get into a private rental market, maybe that's rent arrears, maybe it's money owed to a utility provider, maybe they have a criminal background check or credit barriers that are preventing them. This housing case manager is really along the side with the family, helping them navigate the housing search process. In addition to the housing case manager, there is also employment navigation case management that is available to the adult household members. And those services, the employment navigation and the housing case management services, those are basically delivered simultaneous. And sometimes families are making choices actually to pursue their employment goals or income progression goals over their housing goals, and that's fine too. We just make sure that the services are available to families as they are getting referred in. On the next slide, I'll just quickly go over our goals of the program, of this pilot. The first one is to rapidly rehouse homeless families with the infusion of some client assistance funds, short-term rent assistance, and time-limited case management that is really focused on housing stability, helping people get in the door and helping them overcome barriers to staying in that housing, and that might be the employment. We are also looking to place families in stable housing within their school community, and this is really done in order to reduce the number of moves during a school year that disrupts the students' learning. So we're really looking at placing families within their attendance boundary areas of the elementary school so that child can stay in school and have some consistency in their education. The third goal is to connect families with other services and employment income that really enables them to take over the rent assistance once we step out of the picture. And then the fourth goal as part of our pilot is to reduce the transportation costs incurred by the Highline Public School District. And that's really by stabilizing families within their community. As Jean mentioned, last year there was $846,000 spent in transportation, and those are funds that are coming out of the district's general education fund. So our hope is that by placing families in stable housing, that those funds can be redirected back to the classroom. And the other thing I think that Jean covered well in her presentation is that a lot of the families are actually seeking shelter with friends and families in other parts of our community that are quite a bit ways away from Highline. So in a lot of those cases, the district has to send cabs from, perhaps Burien out to Puyallup to pick up a student. So it's our hope to really see quite a bit of a reduction in transportation costs. On the next slide, I've just demonstrated that really there's a lot of people involved in this pilot, which is fantastic. The pilot funders, KCHA is the main funder of the initiative, and we are providing move-in, rent assistance, and we also have contributed a fair amount of money to evaluation services through geo-education and research. This is King County Housing Authority's first exploration with rapid rehousing. We're typically in the business of giving housing subsidies that are not time limited. So we're really testing in this, and we felt like bringing an evaluator in, one, to measure the housing stability and also any changes in student academic stability was an important measure that we wanted to do. So those are the pieces that KCHA is funding. Building Changes has also contributed funds to the program. They are funding the employment navigation services through a systems innovation grant. And then Building Changes and United Way both have contributed some flexible client assistance funds that can be used to remove housing and or employment barriers that families are coming in with. We've tried to be as flexible as possible with our funds, but still with any federal money, there's still a little bit of restrictions and things we just don't have the ability to use our funds on. So having these other flexible funding sources at the table has been really helpful in our ability to really meet the family's needs and get them in the door of housing. As far as our pilot partners, these are the people that are actually coming to the table monthly and really troubleshooting on the pilot and fine-tuning things along the way. KCHA, the Highline School District, Neighborhood House, Geoeducation and Research is our evaluator, and like I said, they've been at the table, since the very beginning, which has been invaluable. And then Corporation for Supportive Housing, or CSH, we actually brought them in at the beginning of the pilot program based on their experience designing a similar program in the Chicago public school system. So they really brought a level of expertise that we were looking for. And so they came in and helped us and trained all of us and got us going on this road of the Student Family Stability Initiative. On the next slide, I just want to show you some quick stats as I talk about some of the other highlights about the pilot. But collaborative work to begin the design of the SFSI Pilot began in June of 2013, which was about 4 months prior to the pilot being implemented within the schools. I will say that all of the partners were engaged in the program design and really helped shape its character today, which has been fantastic. I think it's been a true collaboration, and all of our partners actually echo that, so it's been fantastic to work with one another. We facilitate monthly partnership meetings, and these are meetings that, at all levels people are engaged in coming to, working with 18 different schools. The school counselors come to these meetings. We use these as opportunities for specific case reviews of families. We review policies, procedures that may need to be adjusted through this pilot period in order to really better serve the families and meet the goals that we've set out for. And as I said before, these are really learning environments, and we all are participating in the problem solving. On the next slide, I just would like to highlight a little bit of success we've had so far. As probably no surprise to you, it's a pretty tight rental market, very tight rental market in King County. And as Jean said, as people leave Seattle and move in to suburban areas of the county, this housing 57 families to date is pretty remarkable. The pilot started housing families in January 2015, so they've done a remarkable job, our partners, in actually getting landlords to open their doors and accept families and getting families into housing. So as of March 18th, we've had 57 families placed in housing, which represents a total of 150 children that have been housed to date, and 116 of them being McKinney-Vento eligible students at Highline. So that's really fantastic too. These, like I said, are pretty remarkable numbers given that the incredibly tight and competitive rental market that our partner Neighborhood Houses is up against. On the next slide, I just wanted to highlight that typically what we're seeing is rent assistance is made available for between 3 and 6 months worth. But on average, families are only requiring 3 to 4 months worth of rent assistance before they actually transition off of that. There has been a total of 49 families who have transitioned off of rent assistance completely out of the 57 that have been housed. And as you'll see from this chart, 3 to 4 months is the average for the vast majority of the clients housed. And something else really important to note here, as part of our evaluation, we are going to be monitoring housing stability for the families that are placed in housing. And our intent is to check in with families at 3, 6, 9, and even at 12 months post-rent assistance to see if they're still stably housed. So that work is underway right now, and it's actually been a little bit challenging. As families stabilize, it's a little bit harder to reach families, and actually I can't necessarily say it's because they're stabilized, but as time goes on, it gets a little bit more challenging to actually get a hold of families. So we're going to continue those efforts and hopefully be able to report out more metrics on that as part of our Year 2 evaluation. The other thing I will just point out is our evaluator, Geoeducation and Research, works really closely with the Highline Public Schools under a data sharing agreement. And they're really tracking and analyzing the transportation cost data and the student outcomes for the housed children right out of Highline Public Schools data management system. So that's work that happens between our evaluator and the school district, but also requires a level of data sharing that goes alongside of that. But that's really kind of challenging work. As you can imagine, with our evaluator is working off of 3 different data management systems, being KCHAs for the housing aspect, Neighborhood House for the employment aspects of the tracking that is happening, and then with Highline Public Schools for the student outcome and data transportation. So it's kind of a cumbersome process to get to the data. The other thing that is just important to note is, as kind of a challenging area, is academic measures for the students that are housed is pretty limited. In the absence of district-wide student achievement tests being administered pre- and post-housing, our metrics really are boiling down to, are being limited to attendance and tardy data. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to see some changes over time in that and be able to demonstrate housing or academic stability for the students, but our academic measures are pretty limited. And then the last point on data is that transportation cost savings data is not easily tracked either. This is information that the district doesn't necessarily have a need to track, hasn't historically at the level that we're looking to track. So Highline has been fantastic to work with as far as our evaluators go, and they're working collaboratively to really kind of drill down on that transportation data a little bit more for the 57 families that have been housed. And then on the last slide, I just would like to emphasize some of the keys to the success of this pilot so far. I mean, as you've heard me say before, is we really have a committed and collaborative group of partners that are working together from from the community-based organizations all the way to the funders. We're all just being as flexible and nimble in this pilot approach as we can. So the collaboration across all partners was absolutely crucial to the effective implementation because of the nature of the design of the program. It was dependent on coordinated delivery of services, and so that's been something that's been working really well. And then again, the flexibility in the program design really aiming to help us achieve some goals, some of our goals that we set out to achieve. And another element that I think all the partners are seeing as so valuable and really more of a best practice approach in rapid rehousing that we'd like to continue to deploy as part of this initiative is the employment navigation services. So of the 23 families that were housed in the first year, 16 different adult members of those 23 households actually was able to attain employment or increase their income during a very short period of time. So that's really good and really seen as potentially the ability for families to be able to retain that rent once we step out. And we are really using our data as we go along. We are using this to really be able to tweak our policies where we need to, and just really be nimble with that. So we're using data and tracking monthly at our partnership meetings, and that's been really helpful. It's given us opportunities to kind of step back and make sure that our intended goals are being achieved as we move through this process of exploration. So with that, that's about all I have on the pilot itself. The next slide, I actually have put links to our first year evaluation, which was just published last night. So there's a link there to our website if you'd like to read more about the pilot. And then the last link I've provided up there is a piece that KUOW recently did on a family that was housed through the Student Family Stability Initiative. It's a pretty compelling story. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Christy, thank you very much. Before we bring Roxana on, I wanted to give Robin a chance to ask a couple of questions of you that we've gotten that are specific to the work that you're doing.
Sure.
Christy, I think you adequately answered this question about what the funding sources were for your project, but I just wanted to comment that King County Housing Authority does have moving to work status, which allows them a lot more flexibility than a lot of public housing authorities. But I think that there are still creative ways that you could use other funds that might be available to your community and make connections with your school district. There's also some things that don't require a ton of funding that I think the rest of our presenters are going to address that just relate to making connections with your housing provider. So I just wanted to highlight that that was a question that people had about the funding for the program. And I think this might be a question for Jean, if you could answer. Could you just define how doubled up is defined under the McKinney-Vento program?
Doubled up is that you've lost your housing through economic reasons, and so you might be living with friends, families, but or acquaintances in some cases. We find our families are moving in with other families who, you know, they're not supposed to have 10 people in a 2-bedroom. So doubled up is you've lost your housing due to economics, usually evictions. But we've had some families that are McKinney-Vento that need to double up because they're living in homes that have been foreclosed on. So the double up is you're living with other people. You're not paying rent to those people, but you're living with other people because of economic reasons.
Thank you for that, Jean. And then we had another question, and maybe Christy, you could answer this one. How does your program interact with coordinated entry?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually don't. We are partners of the countywide effort here in King County to do the rapid rehousing model in our community, but we knew that because we were serving a different definition, our coordinated entry system is using the literally homeless definition, whereas we made a very deliberate decision going into this pilot that we were going to be using the McKinney-Vento definition for the reasons I've already explained. So because of those differences, we are not intersecting with coordinated entry at this point.
Okay, and then one last question for this section, and if other people have asked questions, I haven't forgotten you, but I think they might be broader questions for the whole panel. I see we might have one more too, but are there other pilots being considered in King County, and how would a new district in King County go about forming a partnership with KCHA if they were interested in doing something like the current program?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's a question we get quite frequently. We are still in the phases of testing things and very much in the pilot phase. So I think that our intent is to kind of roll with the second year of the pilot and see how things go and really ensure that families, that this particular intervention in serving homeless families is effective in keeping them housed. So as I said, as part of our evaluative efforts for year 2, we're going to be measuring that housing stability piece. So beyond year 2 evaluation, I think there's opportunity to see if this is something that can be scaled up to more school districts. How would you go about interacting with your housing authority? I think the first thing I would suggest is making connections, finding out if you have a local housing authority, one that has MTW flexibility. That information is usually up on their website. Just kind of educating yourself a little bit about the housing authority, and then just reaching out and making a connection with somebody there, and seeing if they have any partnerships with school districts might be where I would start.
Thank you very much, Christy, and thank you as well, Jean. Next, from Bellingham School District, we have Roxana Paris. Roxana, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Can you hear
Thank
me?
you for joining us today.
Thank you. So, like Gary said, I'm Roxana Paris, and I'm from the Bellingham School District. And Bellingham is located in Whatcom County, which is really just almost to the border. And in Whatcom County, we have 7 school districts. Bellingham is also a McKinney-Vento grant recipient that's managed by the OSPI. And so in Bellingham, we have approximately 11,000 registered students, and our homeless numbers are, so far this year, we've identified 400 homeless students. Last year, we ended with 471 homeless students that we identified and served. So already we are on track to surpass that number. A third of our homeless students are unaccompanied, which I'm going to talk about a little later. But that's Bellingham. And so first I want to tell everyone a little bit about the history of how our homeless program came to be. Patty Hoff and myself, we were very fortunate that the Bellingham School District allowed us to create our homeless program from scratch. So what we did was we attended national, state, and local trainings and searched for best practices. At each of these trainings, we asked anyone that was willing to talk to us on how they collaborated with other districts, with community agencies, and with other programs within their district. And we gathered all of this information and all the ideas, suggestions, and forms and changed them to fit our needs within our districts. We discovered early on that some of our greatest roadblocks existed within our own district, but we were able to eliminate a lot of these barriers with consistent staff training. Every year we train all our staff, our counselors, our registrars, our secretaries, and we do this before the beginning of the school year so that McKinney-Vento was fresh on everyone's mind. And then from there, whatever we learned, whatever we created or produced, we then shared with the other homeless liaisons within Whatcom County. That's a little bit about how this program was created. And we have a couple of exciting things happening here in Bellingham. The first is the Bellingham Promise, which is our district strategic plan, states that we collectively commit to that all our students are cared for and respected. And to fulfill that promise, our district is collaborating with the Northwest Youth Services, which is our local youth shelter, and exploring the idea of adding a shelter to one of our new high schools that is being built. We are just exploring the idea. We're just starting to just see what that would look like. So nothing, it's not a done deal yet, but we are definitely talking about it and see, what comes out of that. Bellingham is part of the Whatcom County School District Homeless Support Consortium. And this consortium, we collaborate with all 7 school districts in Whatcom County. And then as a consortium, we then reach out to all homeless shelters and youth outreach programs in Whatcom County. And this consortium was created to allow all 7 school districts to pool their resources together and to pursue various grant funding. This consortium was created back in 1997, and it's still going strong, so that's really exciting. The consortium consists of homeless liaisons from the school districts and homeless program coordinators. And we meet monthly, and at these monthly meetings we share resources and programs and contact information. So if we have information and changes in community resources, which are always changing, then we are able to share those with the other coordinators at these meetings. We provide McKinney-Vento consultations, so if any of us have a question about a family we're working with or having difficulties finding resources for a family, we're able to discuss these problems or and consult with each other to see how we can better support each other. And we also, if we create a form, we share them, or we share our procedures with each other so we can streamline the services that our homeless families are receiving. And a good example of that is we created a homeless transportation request form that almost all of our 7 school districts are using. So, because what we found was when we shared transportation between school districts, not everyone was getting the same information. So if we had a homeless student that was going to another school district and that student was maybe was diabetic, or there were safety issues, or had certain accommodations, that information wasn't always being shared with the second school district. So we created this form so that everyone was receiving the same information, the needed information, and made those services and streamlined the services that the students were receiving. We also, as a consortium, provide yearly McKinney-Vento training to shelters and homeless outreach programs. One of the greatest benefits of being a part of the consortium is that we are able to support each other. We don't just meet monthly, we also communicate weekly by email. Let's see. Another benefit is that we are able to divide and conquer. Each of us represent the consortium at various committees and collaborations, such as the Whatcom County Coalition to End Homelessness, Family to Family, Community Resource Network. There's a variety of programs that we represent, where we represent the consortium. And then we are able to take the information from these meetings back to the group so that we're all kept up to date on what's happening in our community. One of our successful ongoing collaborations is with the Opportunity Council. It's our local nonprofit community action agency. And through our collaboration, we developed a release of information form that allows homeless liaisons to communicate directly with caseworkers. This partnership has opened communications between both programs, and has resulted in immediate school enrollments in for homeless students and access to services. So as soon as a family goes in to register with the Opportunity Council or work with them, the caseworker will have them sign that release of information. And so right away the school district is aware that the student is in a shelter or so forth, and what services are going to be needed immediately. One of the greatest challenges that we have in Whatcom County is locating resources for our unaccompanied youth. And these are unaccompanied youth are students that are not living in the custody or not in the custody of a parent or legal guardian. In the Bellingham School District alone, 1/3 of our homeless students are unaccompanied. And these students come with barriers that are beyond just the normal lack of housing, food, and clothing. So to open the discussion on how we as a community can establish a comprehensive network with the intent of linking unaccompanied youth to needed services, our consortium is hosting a Youth Education Support Summit on April 29th. And we've invited community agencies and staff from all 7 school districts. Basically, we've invited anyone that works with youth to come to this summit so we can start the conversation. We will have a panel of experts from DSHS, from Columbia Legal, Healthcare, Housing, Banking, CPS, and the panel will address a variety of questions that we obtained through youth needs assessments that were filled out by the school counselors. And these are questions, some of these issues that we want to address by our panel of experts are, for example, a student is not able to, a high school student that wants to get a job, a 16-year-old kid wants to get a job, doesn't have a Social Security number, and he can't get his Social Security number because he needs to have his parents' Social Security number in order to submit their application. And if they don't have a parent, how can they do that? So we want to start looking at the big picture. Health care. Some of these students are not able to access health care because they don't have a parental consent. Just a wide variety of barriers that these youth are facing that we are not able to meet those needs because there's just no services for them. So some of the objectives of this summit is just to increase the community awareness of the barriers that are faced by unaccompanied youth and to create a network of community partners to have an ongoing conversation to address these barriers. We want to start asking the question, are these barriers due to just internal procedures or are they legislative? So do we need to just start talking to our community partners to ask them to change the procedures internally so that these students can start accessing services? Or do we need to start looking at the big picture and look at some changing some laws? So another area that we're going to try to address is housing for these youth. There's very little housing for some of our youth, especially our teen parents. We have several teen parents that there is no housing for them, and so that's another area that we're trying to address through this summit. So, and that is a snapshot of what's happening in Bellingham and Whatcom County.
Thank you very much, Roxana. Do keep us informed, too, on what is happening with both the results of the Youth Summit and the conversations that you're having related to the shelter connected to the high school in your community. Both are topics that I haven't, especially the shelter is something that we haven't heard much about around the state.
Yeah, well, we've emailed several contacts. We've emailed OSPI. We emailed Barbara Duffield in Washington, D.C., and as far as we can tell, no one has ever attempted to do this. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, very. Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Martin, the Homeless Service Coordinator from SNAP in Spokane. Jennifer, are you on the line?
Yeah, hi. I'm also here with Leslie Camden Gould, the McKinney-Vento liaison from Central Valley School District, and so we're going to talk together about our pilot project here in Spokane. Leslie, you want to start?
Sure. So Spokane County is a rural-urban area, 13 school districts in the area. City of Spokane is the largest, and that's covered by Spokane Public Schools. But we're going to talk about a rapid rehousing pilot program that is focused on surrounding areas that's covered by Spokane County. There are 2 school districts in that area that are involved in the pilot program. Cheney School District has over 4,200 students, and so far this year I think they've identified about 116 students as McKinney-Vento eligible. I'm from Central Valley School District, and we have over 13,000 enrolled students, where last year the total identified McKinney-Vento homeless was 526. This year, so far, we've identified 403. Central Valley School District has a couple entities, City of Spokane Valley, and some unincorporated county areas. In Central Valley School District, 85% of our students are in doubled up situations, and only 13% find themselves eligible under the HUD definition for housing help.
Okay, this is Jennifer from SNAP again. I'd like to provide some background information about how this pilot project began. I really want to acknowledge the Spokane County Community Services, Housing, and Community Development Department, who recognized that this was a gap in our community and that our goal needed to be to identify homeless families and be able to keep them in their school of origin. Our community here in Spokane already has existing rapid rehousing funding and programs in place, but the concept was to design a pilot that allowed a certain number of households to access the rapid rehousing program that were identified by that liaison in need of housing that could be located in that specific community. So what we have for our model is we partner with Catholic Charities, and the screening is done either by calling the local 211 or by going to a website called SpokaneCountyHPRP.com to pre-screen all rapid rehousing households. In addition, for this pilot, the liaison is asked a specific question if they're a part of the project and enters a code that allows Catholic Charities and then SNAP to be able to process the request and serve the household as quickly as possible. At that point, SNAP is assigned a full-time housing specialist who begins working with the family to identify appropriate housing resources in that specific district, in that specific neighborhood. And once a unit has been identified and it meets the fair market requirements, the real work begins. We create what's called a housing stability plan, which addresses stable housing, a plan to increase income, connecting them to other employment resources locally, and overall personal health, financial health. And what I really see as a highlight is our ability to connect and include the liaisons ongoing, as well as the school counselors and teachers, to have a long-term goal of student success in the classroom setting. Of course, overall attendance increasing, parent involvement in teacher conferences if that applies, and also making sure homework is being done, which, again, that feedback and that team approach really makes a difference in the overall success for that student as well. So that housing specialist provides overall case management services in those different areas, and the rental assistance is a maximum of 9 months, depending on the need that that family has. As of to date, we have had one family successfully graduate, and if we didn't mention this, the pilot at this point includes a total of 5 elementary schools. In Central Valley, it's 3 elementary schools that are the highest need in terms of low income and numbers of homeless kids identified. And then when we added Cheney School District back a few months ago, same kind of rule applied to identify those families in those areas that need it the most. So with that said, in terms of what our model looks like, we also have one other grant that's made a really big difference that the same department within the county at the Housing and Community Services provides for wraparound needs, because as we all know, if you don't address the other needs that go along with housing, like transportation, simple things like even having ID or being able to get a driver's license, being able to help a family get car insurance or pay to get new tires or get their car repaired is so vital, as well as, for example, paying for a certification for employment purposes has been an extremely integral part of our success. With that said, there are a few challenges to end with that we'd like to be able to share, or better yet, things that I would say we've learned thus far. And the one that I'd like to talk about is, I mentioned earlier, having a maximum of 9 months rental assistance. And what if the family needs more time? What do we do then? I'm all in support of serving families with the least amount of assistance, but as we probably all have encountered, every once in a while you identify a family that needs more time. I think more partnering with the local housing authorities to potentially have housing vouchers available so that there is no time limit on that rental assistance if possible, as well as allowing us to do what we're really in the business of doing, which is overall case management and providing support. And then I'm going to let Leslie share a few other things that, from her point of view, we've learned as well.
Yes, so another one of the issues with the school pilot project to date has been families actually finding housing that fit their specific guidelines within the school building and tenants area. So for me, the idea of connecting with these landlords so they understand the program is essential, because it's been very hard sometimes to connect families or for families to go out in their housing search and find those housing in that school, the school boundary area for the elementary school. The second issue is in Central Valley, we have really large enrollment numbers in the school district, and the schools are very full. And so some schools have no room in their grade levels. So when a student is enrolled during the school year, they might have to be what we call overflowed to another school in the school district until there is an opening in that grade level where they could come back to their school in their neighborhood where they're living. There's two issues with this. The McKinney-Vento law states that homeless students are allowed to stay in the school they are attending, which could be that overflowed school for the entire year to ensure academic stability. If we ask them to come back after when an opening comes available in the grade level, that academic stability might be lost a bit. The second is that the school pilot requires that the family find housing within the school attendance area, and it's difficult to refer families to the program when their residential school is different than the school where they're attending. So making this a district-wide program could solve some of those stability and academic success issues that could be tracked very easily if they were able to find housing within, say, the school where they were overflowed to.
And I just wanted to interject one last detail. This pilot here in Spokane has been going for approximately a year now, and we have households that are currently housed as well as constantly balancing those that are in housing search phase. So as of today, we have 7 households that are currently housed and receiving case management and rental assistance, 6 that are in housing search phase, and the one I mentioned that graduated after 9 months successfully. So that pretty much concludes what we're here doing in Spokane. Thanks, Cary.
Leslie, Jennifer, thank you both very much. We have a few questions that I think everybody on our panel might have perspective or comments on.
So the first question is, I'm sure there's a few people on this call who don't have a relationship with their school district. So we're just wondering, how did you start the conversation with your school district, or vice versa, how did you start your conversation with your housing provider if you're the school district? And I guess maybe we can go to Spokane first.
So, you know, ever since I've been the McKinney-Vento homeless liaison in the school district, I have been a participant, an active participant in the Spokane Homeless Coalition and the Continuum of Care also. So I think that as a school district, that has been for me the most important thing that I have ever done in my work, is to connect with the housing providers on that level and to advocate for families and students who are in homeless situations. So I would encourage everyone to get involved in their homeless coalition or their continuum of care process.
Thank you very much for that. Highline or Bellingham, do you guys have anything to add?
Well, I agree. You definitely have to be very involved with all of your housing programs in your community, because that's, you know, those partnerships are very vital.
Yeah, I would echo that same. Oh, sorry, Jean, go ahead.
Oh, I would just say the same thing, just to be involved with your community organizations. But I do think, and you know, Highline, I think King County Housing had some programs in the Highline School District, but you know, it's a district that has grown with need in terms of stability, just general stability and mobility in our schools, and just housing without any shelters or family shelters in our district really spoke to the need for a partnership with King County Housing.
Yeah, the only thing I would add on to that is, you know, I think KCHA and Highline in particular it was a bit unique because one of the elementary schools in the Highline School District sits on a KCHA property that is probably one of our largest subsidized housing properties. So the relationship with Highline has been there for many, many years, and there are already established programs that we do to support the Highline students in our communities. But that said, we are now exploring partnerships with other school districts as we start to expand or broaden our educational initiative focus here at KCHA. So I think that it goes both ways. I think it's important. It would be really great to have the school folks at the homeless table, because in a lot of cases that's where families are showing up, is in their school. So I think it would be great to have them at our table, and it would likewise be good for housing providers to reach out and engage with the schools in order to reach the families.
This is Jennifer in Spokane again. Sorry, this is Jennifer in Spokane. I thought of one other really important point. In Spokane, we were very fortunate because I think it was partially the funder who recognized what existing funding streams do we have that could support this effort. And I failed to mention that the funding streams that we're using are a combination of consolidated homeless grant dollars as well as Homeless Housing Assistance Act dollars. And so I think the funders looking at these eligibility requirements and making a prioritization to serve this population and address these efforts is something that can also be done. Thank you.
And this is Jean from Highline. I would just add that it is important for school people or liaisons to go to the community meetings. I believe, and with other providers, just to explain the issue of homeless children. Because I think when people think about homeless, we're thinking about homeless adults that we see in our community, walking around, sleeping in corners. But really, homeless children are the hidden homeless. And people don't realize that families are living with too many people. One thing I did not know and realize was how many preschoolers are associated with our students that are in our school. When we do our pre-screening for the program, we list all the children. So we might have 4 school-age kids, but we might have 3 preschoolers. And that's really impactful when we talk to other people in the community about what we're seeing, and to explain that this is an issue for all and an issue to be addressed in our community.
Thank you, everyone, for those great answers. We also had another question from someone who was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your staffing works as homeless school liaisons. I know that some school districts have dedicated liaisons, and others, the liaisons are doing other jobs as well as their function as reporting on homeless students. So could you guys just talk a little bit about how your time works and how you staff your projects?
So in Highline, we've always had a dual job. So I was a school social worker as well as the liaison. So that was before I retired. I know Christy's laughing because it doesn't seem like I'm retired. So I was a school social worker with 15 schools, 3 days a week, and 2 days a week they allocated me to be homeless liaison. And the homeless liaison part was paid for a little bit out of our competitive grant, but mostly out of our health and social work services budget. And so now I'm just a homeless liaison 2 days a week.
And this is Leslie in Bellingham. I'm one of the lucky ones. I am full-time McKinney-Vento liaison for the school district. So I get to spend 100% of my time on advocating and connecting and networking and working directly with students and families. I am a school social worker, but I dedicated specifically to the McKinney-Vento role.
And in Bellingham, we have the 2 full-time homeless liaisons. And traditionally, or for years ago, it was just we had 2 homeless liaisons that were part-time. But what we noticed was our homeless numbers would increase every time the district would increase our hours. Our numbers would increase, and so a couple of years ago they made us full-time, and that's all we do, just homeless liaison, homeless work. And then we were always grant funded, but last year the district has started funding the program. So now we are part of the district and funded 100% by the district. And that's all we do, homeless.
Leslie, as a follow-up question, could you say a little bit about the path that you feel like your district went on to get to, funding your position full-time? Because that is a choice that school districts can make or not make.
I don't know what their thought was, but I've always been full-time. So they just realized 14 years ago that they were going to fund this position. I know that it's funded through Title I and through a McKinney-Vento grant that we get from the state, but it's always been full-time. They've never looked at it as a part-time position.
I
don't know
apologize.
that answers your question, but.
I think so, Leslie. I apologize. I actually meant to ask Roxana because she was talking about sort of a movement in her school district. Sorry, everyone.
So you wanted to know why it went from part-time to full-time?
Yeah, just if you have any things that you think were highlighted by your district that kind of helped them along to focusing more on, and you already said one thing, but if there was anything else.
Well, another part is our school counselors. Our school counselors are spending more and more time trying to help these our homeless students, especially on high school level with our unaccompanied youth. They're spending, a homeless kid would come into their office. They have nowhere to go that night, so they would spend hours trying to help that student. So the district realized that we were needed. And so we do a lot to support the counselors, and so it was a natural fit to make us full time so we can support the staff and because there was that need was there.
Great, thank you. And Jean, I just wanted to follow up with you too. You said that you were the liaison a few days a week, and that you had 15 schools that you oversaw. Do you have people appointed at each school to do reporting on homeless students in the Highline District if you don't have a liaison located at each school?
Well, yes. So I think, as I mentioned, we have what we call McKinney-Vento designees in each of our schools. So those would be the people when a family comes in and says, I'm homeless, or I'm living with someone else. The office person would direct them to that designee who's familiar with the law and we've given training to, and then they fill out our interview form and transportation form and then send it on over to us. So my role is to double check on that to make sure they're truly homeless within the definition, and then we get everything going in terms of nutrition and transportation. If they need school supplies, and we get those, and I sign off on expenditures for field trips and other such school-related services. So yes, it's the first point of contact for a homeless family is at their school with that McKinney-Vento designee.
So we had another question wondering if Washington is kind of a leader on the school partnership idea, or if there are other areas around the country that you would point to where housing and school partnerships are catching on.
Yeah, I can respond to some of that. Yeah. As I said, we actually learned about the school partnership housing collaboration probably prior to 2013, but it was really stemming from the Chicago rapid rehousing pilot that they had tested, and so I think that it is actually starting to catch on a national level, and we're starting to see a lot more of it. Housing authorities partnering with schools. Seattle Housing Authority is doing it with Seattle Public Schools. It's just being done in different ways, whether it's place-based initiatives, whether it's housing. I think there's definitely a trend that this is starting to happen more across the country.
Another question was, for the school districts where you have housing partnerships and you're serving both doubled up students and literally homeless, do you have a way of prioritizing those who you feel are at imminent risk of homelessness amongst your families?
I'll go first. We don't actually prioritize that. As you might remember from the slide I presented, it was a pretty small number that's coming into our pilot program at King County Housing Authority with Highline School District that is literally homeless as compared to the number that are being doubled up. But we have toyed with the idea of doing prioritization before, but it gets really, really complicated when we start going down that road, only because there's so many other factors that weigh into this. And prioritizing one family and then you have a pool of families that are not moving as quickly as others for a whole variety of reasons. So we have not moved in that direction at this point of the pilot. It's just more or less who's getting referred in and at what point, and like one of the other presenters mentioned earlier, it gets a little bit tricky when you've got pretty limited case management staff. At least for us, we've got one housing case manager and one employment navigation case manager, and they're really, really busy doing all the screening, helping people get into housing, helping people find employment. So at this point, our prioritization level has really been about those families that are utilizing taxi cabs. So because one of our goals is to see a reduction in transportation costs in the school district. So if I was to say we were doing any prioritization, that's probably where it would be.
And
oh, sorry.
Sure. Oh, I was going to say, Central Valley, do you have anything to say?
No, I don't prioritize families. When they come to my attention and income-wise and just their housing situation, I would refer them right away. I don't wait around and prioritize.
I think from where SNAP sits, when we identify a new household, we take it case by case, and if they're sleeping on the streets, our number one priority is going to be short-term. Can we get you into a short-term motel stay that's paid for by the program if necessary? Obviously, what it to me is really getting at is that you have to address the other barriers that are keeping them from potentially being successful in going out and finding the housing and securing it. So again, if you don't have a program that includes some of those financial needs like transportation or a short-term emergency motel shelter stay, while they're in housing search, even things as basic as having some sort of phone or way to communicate with a potential landlord is so important. I think ideally, too, what I'd like to see us do is partner more with the colleges here and utilize some of the social work interns to be available to help do more of the housing search phase where they meet a family with a potential landlord to help support and ensure that that interview process goes smoothly and that the right information about the program is being provided. But each household is in some type of crisis, and so what is it going to take for them to be successful, and what other needs can we address is the approach we take.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything else to add?
Oh, I would just like to say I'm Jean. I think it's been interesting because when the families, a lot of families, will do our pre-screening for the SFSI program. And some surprises that I've had is some of the ones that I would say would be high need or maybe even in sheltered or just living too overcrowded, for some reason haven't followed through. So that's been interesting to see actually who signs the consent form and how fast that paperwork comes in. So when the paperwork comes in and the consent form to share information to King County Housing, to Neighborhood House, to GEO, it's uploaded into a system, and then the King County Housing screens and then passes on to Neighborhood House. And I did want to mention also that we talk a lot about how to message this program. We don't want to give false hope to families that everyone is going to get in the SFSI program. Some families have more barriers than others. some have more motivation than others, and other things going on. So our messaging is this is just one other option for you to find permanent housing. Are you interested in that? And this is how this program might be able to help you. While you're waiting on a call back, we want you to continue a housing search, continue using community resources. And I think that's fair, and I think that's a good way, a good message to families. But we've also, another surprise has been families have called us and said, can I move into your district so I will get into the housing program? Families are talking, families are contemplating moving in. We discourage that, but try to talk them through that. So that has been a surprise to me.
Thank you, Jean. This is a question for Christy. Have you made any policy changes at King County Housing Authority as a result of what you've learned from this program that you're operating with the Highline School District? Or is there anything that we might be able to do at the state level to make changes that would have made the program easier for you to implement?
Yeah, here at KCHA, we are not at the point where we're looking at making any broad policy changes to our subsidized housing programs. And I don't know that that's necessarily the intent of this pilot. That said, we are, in the Homeless Initiatives Department specifically, we are interested in learning whether or not rapid rehousing is an intervention that works effectively in returning people to housing. So we are looking at potentially expanding this pilot to a different population and doing something similar for survivors of domestic violence. Basically what I mean by that is not necessarily connected with the schools, but doing a rapid rehousing short-term rent assistance program for survivors. So we are looking at that, but broadly across the Housing Authority, not at this point. We're absolutely still in the learning process about this, and we need to learn from our evaluative efforts before we look to see if there's other pieces of this rapid rehousing model that might be useful across the board. And then as far as the state level question, I think Robin could probably articulate that best, but I think there is potential to do something like this more broadly across the state. And Robin, if I could punt to you to actually speak to that, I think that would be really informative.
Well, there is a proposal before the legislature to provide a pilot program. There's $1 million in the House budget right now to do housing and school partnerships very similar to what we were talking about today, and also another $1 million to provide resources to McKinney-Vento liaisons so that they have more resources to help identify homeless students. So that's something that's going on at the state level, would be, I think, super helpful. There's also some language in the budget, in the House budget, around some rental assistance for rapid rehousing for TANF families. And that program, there is some language that would make it intentional connections with schools for that program, so that housing providers would be reaching out to schools to make connections for that. And I think that's about what I know about right now about what's going on at the state level. We had one more question, and we're getting close to the end of our questions, so if anyone else has a question, please chime in now. The last question was around just if you guys have any engagement with foster youth or maybe unaccompanied homeless youth with any of your programs. And I think the other question was, part of the question was, when do foster care youth become eligible for McKinney-Vento services?
Well, all foster care, all children who are removed from from the home into foster care, that first year they qualify for McKinney-Vento. When they're first removed from the home, they qualify. So once you qualify for McKinney-Vento, you qualify for the whole academic year. So foster care students that the second year from the time they were removed, they no longer qualify for McKinney-Vento services. So that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is right now. As far as unaccompanied youth, we definitely have, in Bellingham, because we have such a large population of unaccompanied youth, we are very active in reaching out to these youth. We have different groups in our community. We have a group called the Giving Circle, and these ladies literally pass the hat around once a month and to, purchase sleeping bags and cards for the kids, gift cards so the kids can purchase shoes, clothing, so forth. We've been trying to reach out to the community more to help fill the needs of these unaccompanied youth. So there's a lot going on to help these youth. Unfortunately, it's not enough.
In Spokane, in Central Valley School District, most of our homeless unaccompanied high school youth are doubled up and couch surfing, basically.
There aren't really any identified programs if they're under 18 that most of the housing programs can support due to funding eligibility requirements. So that youth that falls under 18 is stuck in a bad position. And when you're talking rapid rehousing, you're asking a landlord to consider renting to someone under 18. That's a challenge in and of itself. We have a local responsible renters education program and certificate that sometimes will help if it's a private landlord who's a little more flexible, but sometimes putting a young adult into that kind of environment can be detrimental. Not to say that a shelter really is the solution either. It just seems like we need some new innovative middle step between the two, between shelter and a rapid rehousing model. So that's, to me, the danger of a lot of the moving away from transitional housing that we've seen with our funding cycles, is that it brings back to light that that's a priority population for why you continue to offer a transitional housing model. And for single homeless adults 18 and older, Spokane, for coordinated single homeless assessment purposes, has prioritized that population, 18 to 21-year-old, as priority for transitional housing. So not to get off topic, but just to make a plug for why we might need to continue to support some transitional housing models supporting that age group's needs.
And OSPI really wants us as liaisons to be educating and training people in the community about unaccompanied youth, because I believe in our district we do that, but we probably have qualified 80 unaccompanied youth. So that's not very many compared to the others that are doubled up in the situation. One thing that I did last year is Antonio and I were asked to talk to the all the teen librarians in King County about McKinney-Vento and who was McKinney-Vento and who wasn't. And I think that's real impactful because a lot of teen librarians do see these kids and can talk with them, and they see them more on a daily basis. So I guess I would encourage to get connected with your librarians, especially the teen librarians.
We had a follow-up question regarding whether youth in foster care would be eligible for McKinney-Vento services, I think particularly around transportation. If they were to move foster care placements, is it your understanding that they would then be able to access services once again?
No, they wouldn't. This is Leslie from Central Valley. It's from their initial placement in foster care. And if for some reason that case should be should go away and a brand new case be opened up, then they would be eligible then again for that that re-eligibility for McKinney-Vento. Right. But just moving placements doesn't make them re-eligible.
Only that first year that they're homeless.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they qualify for transportation?
Right. Yeah, the term is awaiting foster care. So when that child is removed from the home, they are awaiting foster care for their dependency hearing within 30 or how many ever days, and they would be McKinney-Vento for the balance of the year. And that was a change a few years ago, because prior to a few years ago, kids were in foster care a long time and moving all over the place, and school districts were, picking up that cost. So the law did change to just, as said, the first year are awaiting foster care.
Perfect. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Jean, Christy, Roxana, Jennifer, and Leslie, all for your help today and for this discussion and for taking questions. Thanks to Robin at Building Changes and Matt with Commerce for helping me here in Olympia. When this webinar concludes, you'll get a email in an hour or so that includes a survey. If you could fill that out, we would appreciate it. That would help us improve things like this in the future. That webinar also, or that survey also includes a question about future topics if you're interested in us facilitating more statewide conversations like this. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.